Works of art can sometimes be judged by how deeply their emblems and motifs have lodged in the collective memory. On this measure, Eugène Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People has few rivals. The painting, endlessly appropriated for political activism, advertising, and entertainment, has entered the cultural consciousness as shorthand for hope through resistance. It has appeared in movements like the May 1968 protests in France, the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations, Black Lives Matter posters, and the Yellow Vest protests, each time reinforcing the notion that revolt and valiance stride forward hand in hand. To me, it is one of the great paintings of the Romantic movement, but what makes it so persuasive and provocative, enough that the French government hid it from view for decades? Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People is an enormous painting, over 10 feet wide. Its grandeur and multi-person subject proclaim it to belong to the noble tradition of history paintings, as a work of moral edification steeped in national heritage. But the parts don't quite fit. We see a composition dominated by ordinary people, warmongering in the chaos of revolution. Lifeless bodies lie beneath their feet. With the flavour of death all around, the established order is threatened as the city behind dissolves into a cloud of smoke. In these terms, it's hard to overstate the radicalism of this painting. At the centre is the allegorical figure of Liberty, her face depicted in profile with classical features, her hands clutching a musket and a flag. She is a composite embodiment. In traditions of French revolutionary iconography, the figure of Liberty was given the name Marianne, a title that possibly implied a secular equivalent to the Virgin Mary. Meanwhile, her bare breasts echo the figure of Venus, goddess of love. On her head she wears a felt hat, known as a Phrygian cap, which was an established symbol of revolutionary freedom. Among the insurgents, each figure contributes to the painting's symbolic punch. Beside Liberty, a boyish student brandishes a pair of stolen pistols, capturing the revolutionary appetite of the young. A man in a top hat and clutching a hunting shotgun, likely a member of the bourgeoisie, also joins the fight, while a soldier of the National Guard, identifiable by his uniform, lies dead at the fore of the painting. At Liberty's feet, a man in a blue shirt, likely a print worker, strains to catch her eye. He represents some of the most militant and aggrieved revolutionaries. As one of the first to take to the barricades, print workers were most affected by the press restrictions that helped spark the uprising. Notice too the blue, red and white colours of his clothing, echoing the French tricolour. Perhaps the most transgressive figure is the man in the lower left, a half-naked worker with a missing sock and exposed pubic hair. He has blood pouring from his side that seeps into the cobblestones, offering a rawness that underlies the desperate nature of the people's struggle. The two instances of nudity in the picture, Liberty and the dead worker, also lend the image a subtle sexualized undercurrent, one attached to dirt, death, and bravery. One might think that this subtext is an ambiguous provocation, a means of pushing the theatre of the scene towards the visceral and the libidinal end of the spectrum of human impulse. Is this a real or imagined scene? The answer tells us much about the painting's effectiveness. France's recent history was a landscape shaped by Napoleon's tumultuous reign, which ended with his exile to Elba in 1814. Though he briefly returned during the 100 Days, his final defeat at Waterloo in 1815 led to the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy under Louis XVIII. Following Louis's death in 1824, his brother Charles X assumed the throne, but his reactionary policies, including press censorship and voting restrictions, sparked public outrage. This tension erupted in the 3 glorious days of July 1830, when Parisians from all social classes rose in revolt. In the medieval warren of Paris's streets, workers, students, and the bourgeoisie erected barricades from torn-up cobblestones, creating defensive positions against the king's guards. It is this violent revolt that Liberty Leading the People was inspired by, as the painting's subtitle tells us, Paris on July 28, 1830. After 3 days of intense street fighting, Charles X was forced to abdicate and flee to England. Yet the truth is, this scene is largely a work of fiction. The concept of the people was almost certainly more nebulous than the painting would have us believe. In all likelihood, it was only a small proportion of the Parisian populace who mounted the barricades with weapons. Part of the painting's power, therefore, is to bear witness to and mythologize a universal people. In the painting, the location of Paris is only hinted at by a few buildings on the right side of the canvas. Amid them is Notre Dame. Look closely and you can see the flag of the tricolour flying on its bell tower, a reference to the real-life display of the flag on the cathedral during the revolt. Otherwise, Delacroix has shrouded the background in smouldering mists of bonfire and gunfire. The smoke gives the central scene an abstract quality, thereby focusing our attention on the figures, their movements and riotous zeal. Where are the figures going to? Where are they coming from? These questions are deliberately obscured. The figures are crowded and up close. The artist runs the risk here of the composition tipping into unruliness, but Delacroix manages to avoid this by using a strong pyramidal form to underlie the structure. This classical composition helps to contain the frenzy, accommodating rather than subduing it. The painting then is notional and constructed. Likewise, the figure in the centre, Lady Liberty raising the French flag, is an artistic innovation. Even her clothing appears to be a concoction of ancient Greek tunic with contemporary peasant dress. And so this painting fuses a series of disparate ideas into a unified whole, which I think is what gives the image its singular and persuasive power. Its invented quality is precisely what allows it to forge so many meanings for so many subsequent viewers. Delacroix's revolutionary credentials were slight. He counted himself as a mere bystander in the events of 1830. In a letter to his brother, he described himself as a simple stroller, who just happened to face the same risk of stopping a bullet as the impromptu heroes who advanced on the enemy with pieces of iron fixed to broom handles. He was, however, deeply embedded in French culture, and sensed an opportunity to make a painting that exuded patriotism and passion, two of his favourite themes, using the July 30th revolution as his subject. Delacroix was no stranger to riotous paintings. In 1827, he made his almost overwhelming The Death of Sardanapalus, a chaotic depiction of the legendary Assyrian king's final moments. Sardanapalus is remembered as a decadent and indulgent ruler who chose to die in a grand act of self-destruction rather than be captured by his enemies. According to legend, he ordered the burning of his palace along with all his treasures, concubines and servants, a story that Delacroix appears to have revelled in. Works like this cemented Delacroix's reputation as a leading figure of French Romanticism. Born near Paris in 1789 into a family of diplomats, he began his artistic training in 1815 in the atelier of Pierre Narcisse Guérin. The following year, he furthered his studies at the École des Beaux-Arts, where he developed a passion for painting and printmaking. He was especially influenced by his friend Theodore Géricault, and notably his painting The Raft of Medusa, from which Delacroix probably borrowed the image of his semi-naked dying man. Liberty Leading the People was first shown publicly at the 1831 Salon. Crowds are said to have gathered around the painting, enticed by the work and, in some cases, repelled by it. One writer who visited the exhibition, Heinrich Heine, was particularly struck by Delacroix's image. For him, the painting represented an uprising of the very lowest portions of society. And there we have it. A great thought has ennobled and sainted these poor common people, and again awakened the slumbering dignity of their souls. The work was an immediate success, leading to the French government buying the painting in 1831 for 3,000 francs. The intention was to hang it in the throne room of the Palais de Luxembourg, but it was soon deemed too inflammatory and removed from view. For over 40 years it remained more or less out of sight, until the Louvre eventually bought the painting in 1874 after the recent establishment of the Third Republic. Works like this ought to remind us that some paintings reach far beyond the realm of art history, taking on new meanings as they resonate anew within contemporary culture. Whether in activism, advertising, or pop culture, liberty leading the people remains an endlessly recycled emblem of resistance. From the graffitied walls of Gaza City to the cover of Coldplay's Vida la Vida, its universal adoption as a symbol of resistance and freedom shows no sign of ending.